This video is sponsored by Skillshare. What's going on, guys? Ultra Anastasio here with FlytPath.com. Now here I have the DJI Mini 2 as well as the Air 2S, and these are pretty much my two go-to drones at the moment, mainly because I got this 1-inch sensor, all the new features on the Air 2S, and then if you wanted something a little bit smaller, compact, a little quieter, I will normally whip out this right here, the DJI Mini 2. Now when it comes to some of the safety features of these drones, there's definitely an internal checklist I will normally go through, mainly because I just kind of go through the habits of how I go out and fly, what I look for in the app. Now with that said, let's go through the list of safety features I will normally just automatically do whenever I'm out there flying a drone. But before that, a quick word from our sponsor, Skillshare. And for those that aren't familiar with Skillshare, Skillshare is a learning community that really focuses around the creative arts. So if you're like me and you're into videography, photography, illustration, Skillshare has thousands of classes for you to choose from. And for those that don't know, I'm actually a user experience designer by day. I was using a lot of Sketch and InVision software, but now it's kind of moved into the whole Figma and Webflow environment. And for me to ramp up quickly in some of these softwares, I've actually been taking a Figma class from Vaco X, who actually goes through the whole Figma into Webflow development process in one of his classes. So if you're looking at leveling up one of your creative skills, or if you actually want to add a new skill to your tool set, make sure you guys use that link down below. And a huge thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. The first 1,000 people to use that link down below will get 1 month free trial of Skillshare. And now, back to the video. So as I jump into this list, just know that a lot of these principles apply to pretty much almost every drone that's out there. So it's not necessarily just for this DJI lineup, but of course I'm gonna be referencing this, the application, and some of the features that are in the DJI Fly app. So just wanna let you guys know that, but a lot of these principles do apply for a lot of the drones that are on the market. Now for the first safety tip, when you first launch the app and you get out there and fly, you're gonna want to always hear that the home point has been set. Now that might seem pretty obvious. However, a lot of times people might try to either power up their drone indoors where you normally won't get a GPS signal, so the home point won't be set. So if you are that type to power it up and start everything indoors, just know that that home point might not be set even though you're gonna walk outside.
The home point has been updated. Please check it on the map.
And honestly, it's a pretty common thing to hear about, that people will just get out there, launch it, and really they don't have a full GPS signal. They'll take it off, and really you're flying in almost like an attitude mode, and you don't have a home point, which means if they ever had to go back into a return to home, it might not be able to plot exactly where you started from. So for the first tip, just make sure you guys are hearing and seeing on that screen that your home point has been set. Now for my next tip, if you want to have the best reception, you're always, of course, going to want to stay line of sight, which means you are line of sight of your drone, and not even just line of sight visually, but your remote control as well. Now if you are flying the Mini 2 or the Air 2S, you'll have a remote just like this. If you are flying the Mini 1, you'll probably have this style remote. In order for you to get the best reception from your remote control to your aircraft, you're going to want to have this flat surface right here pointed towards your drone while it's in the air. So if you want the best reception and you're using something like this, you actually want to have your antennas up like that and pointed at your drone this way. If you point them out this way, the reception is not going to be as strong if you're pointing it this way. Now if you are flying above you, now this would work because you are using these sides of the antennas. But if you're out there standard flying, you're going to want to keep these up and have that flat surface of the antennas pointed in a direction of your drone. Now, next thing I do is set my return to home height. Now, the main reason why you want to have this adjusted every time you go out there and fly is because you might be running into different obstacles, and the height of those obstacles are going to vary based on your location. So whenever you go out there and fly, you always want to look around, see your surroundings. Are there trees, lights? Are there any power lines? And you always want to set your return to home higher than any of those obstacles. If you forget to do that, and if you're flying in a dense area and it has to return to home for some odd reason, and your return to home height might be too low, maybe there's a building in the way, you are actually probably going to run into that building, especially if you're using something like the Mini 2. Now here we have a little bit different. We have the sensors on the Air 2S, but you're going to want to have that return to home height set higher than any obstacle in your way when you are out there flying. The next feature is the phone charging on the DJI Fly app. Now, I'm not 100% sure as far as the feature on Android, but as far as iOS goes, on the latest firmware, they did add that back in there. As far as a toggle goes, so all you have to do is go on to Control, scroll down, go to phone charging. I will normally toggle that on. That way the battery in your remote control will keep your phone charged while you're out there flying. For my next tip, the one thing that you might run into, and I actually run into this a lot, is that when you're out there flying, you could be out there even at a shorter amount of distance, that you might get a weak signal on your RC to your drone. Now, I did talk about that earlier as far as pointing your remote control properly towards your drone. However, if you are flying at a greater distance, you might be behind small, tree lines, you might get a weaker signal. And you can tell if you have a weak signal by looking at that RC signal strength on the top right of your application. Whenever I see my signal getting weak, the first thing I'll normally do is lay off the sticks, make sure I'm in a solid locked GPS and the drone's not flying anywhere. And then what I'll do is raise my drone up. By raising the drone up, ideally you're able to get either above an obstacle or just get a better line of sight with your remote control to your drone, and that will normally always solve that issue. And for my next safety feature, one of the things that I think a lot of people might not realize that's in there is the ability to update your home point. Now, we did talk about the home point. When you first get up in the air, you want to make sure you have that home point set, because if it does have to go back and return to home, you want to make sure it's going back to the right place. But a lot of times if you're out there flying and you might be either on a bike or walking, or a lot of times they'll take it on one end of the beach, walk down to the other end, and your home point when you first took off is actually where you first started. The great thing about it is that you can still update your home point. That way, if for some odd reason it goes back into return to home, you're not actually going back to the first location that you took off from. You can actually update it to where you are. So if you do move around a lot, if you're riding a bike, if you have moved a pretty far distance away from where you initially took off, what you want to do is just update your home point. For my next tip, I think this is one of the main reasons why a lot of people will either find themselves in trouble or they will crash, and that is not understanding the orientation of your drone. Now, if you are out in a wide open field and you can't really tell by what you see on screen exactly which direction you are, well, here I'm over at a park. I know that there's a freeway on the right hand side, so I can kind of tell exactly which direction the drone is pointed in. But a lot of times if you are out there and you don't know exactly which way it's pointing, what I don't normally do is pull up the maps on the bottom left. Now, when you do pull up the maps, you'll see where on the map you're located as far as the home point, and you'll also see an arrow which is showing you the direction of the drone. So if you aren't sure which direction you are pointing, just look at the arrow, start turning your drone here on your left remote, and you'll see it start spinning around. That way you know that you're either pointing towards you or back to the home point, or you're pointing away. Just an easy way for you to get back your orientation. And while we're on the maps and talking about that arrow, this is definitely one of the things I will use pretty much every time I go out there and fly. And that is when I return to home manually, which means I'm actually piloting the drone back manually and not pressing the return to home button. What I'll do is bring up the maps, look at that arrow, and as you can see, there's a red line that actually points straight from the drone back to your home point. I will normally just turn the drone around, point it right back at that line, switch it over to sport, make sure I am above everything, so I'm above all the tree lines of light. Move it over to sport, and I will actually just follow that line straight back home. Now, that's just the way I will normally do it. A lot of times people will just default to using return to home. I will always recommend manually piloting your drone back and reserving that return to home if you need it for a second or third option. But what you want to do is just practice piloting your drone back, and that's one of the quickest ways for me to do it. Now, this next safety tip is not really I would say it's a safety tip in the sense of don't do it unless you're comfortable doing it. But me personally, I will normally always either hand launch and hand catch my drone when bringing it back in. However, be on the safety side if you're not comfortable doing it and you're not sure about the orientation of the drone, how it's going to react. Of course, wait, get some experience first. But for me, I will normally try to hand launch and hand catch a drone unless it's very, very windy and I feel like, the drone is just not stable enough in the air. There might be some situations where grabbing it out of the air is going to be necessary. But another safety tip is don't jump into it too soon. Try to understand your drone, and if you guys want more tips on hand launching and hand catching, check out this video above. I talked to you a little bit more about what the drone is actually doing in the air when you're trying to hand launch and hand catch. And for my final tip is something that ideally you don't want to use, but it is the find your drone feature. And the reason why I say you don't want to use it all the time, or hopefully you don't have to, is because normally if you are using it, it's because you've either crashed your drone, your battery might have died, you might have had to take an emergency landing somewhere. What you want to do is turn on the Find My Drone feature in the app. And at the bottom of the app, there's a little button that says Start Beeping. So what you want to do is click that. That way your drone will actually start making a beeping noise. And as long as you have signal, as long as the battery wasn't dislodged and you still have GPS on there, what you're going to want to do is open up the maps on that Find My Drone, and you should be able to see, unless you fell into the water or something like that, you should be able to see where your drone is located, what you want to do is, of course, just start working your way towards where the drone is located. And like I said, if you are in a bush or a tree, you want to turn that beeping on so that you are able to hear it if in case you're not able to visually see it. Of course, there's a bunch of other safety tips that we can give. And actually, if you guys have some of your top safety tips, let me know in the comments section down below. What are some of the ones that you will normally do every single time you go out that you'd like to share with somebody else? And once again, thanks to our sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Make sure you guys do use those links down below. The first 1,000 people will get 30-day free trial of Skillshare. As always, if you guys got some value from this video, a big like would be much appreciated. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that bell to be notified when I post new videos. This is Aldrin Stasio with FlytPath.com. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.